Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Age of AI, our series covering the rapid evolution of the AI landscape, exploring what's now, what's next, how that impacts the world of business, the workplace, individuals, and the world. I'm your host, Shelly Kramer, Principal Analyst here at Kramer Co. And today we are exploring what I like to call the connectivity gap, that space between a brilliant AI model and the actual data where real work happens. And we're going to dig into a milestone that I think generally moves the needle on that problem. I'm joined today by Drew Garner, who's the Senior Vice President of Engineering at Smartsheet. And we're going to talk about Smartsheet's new MCP-enabled integration with Claude. We're going to get into why this matters, not just as a product announcement, but really as a signal of where the whole industry is heading. Drew, thank you so much for joining me today. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Me as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I warned you before we started recording, but I love to start these conversations on a personal note, so I hope you're prepared to share some deets with me. What I'm looking for here is just share with us a little bit about your kind of career journey, your personal backstory. I'd love to get a chance to know you a little better.
Sure. Yeah. So I have about a 25-year career in technology. I did start here in Seattle. I started in the information security business. My fun anecdote was my first job in 2001 when the bubble burst was I actually had to dress up as a telephone repairman and do pen tests for companies where I walked in the sniffer into server rooms when I had basically zero idea of what I was doing and convince socially engineer the receptionist to let me into the server room when I had just been on the job for a few weeks out of college. Right. So that was the very first job, and then I got into various online services.
Now, wait a minute.
Sure.
They let you in almost
They
every
let me
time.
in. I had a 100% success rate.
Yeah,
Did
they were
about a
just like,
dozen
oh,
pen
sure,
tests.
go ahead. It's just
Yeah.
IT.
It all
Oh my
became
gosh.
like if you have a hard hat and the right jumpsuit, it's kind of like the joke. If you can carry a ladder anywhere, you can get into a movie theater or whatever business. That's the ongoing joke because they assume some work is being done. So it was actually much easier than I expected it to be.
And really terrifying when you think
Yeah.
about it.
Oh,
Yes,
totally terrifying because everything.
absolutely.
Yeah. And
Absolutely.
then
Okay, well, I interrupted you
sure.
because I think I knew exactly what your success rate was. I mean, I just
Yeah.
figured what your success rate was. And quite frankly, that was 2001.
Yeah.
This is 2026. I'm not so sure. I don't even want to think about that happening today because I'm sure that
Yeah.
it probably still could.
Yeah. And then I got into the online services world, and I just was able to be fortunate enough to spend a bunch of time overseas, living in Europe for 15 years, building teams there, and then back here in the U.S. for the last 3 years, working in both telehealth and online services, and now here at Smartsheet.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I know you've been at Smartsheet now for about 6
Yeah.
months, which,
Yeah.
in AI time is basically a decade, right?
Right.
And certainly gray hair inducing for me anyway. But so when you stepped into this SVP role at Smartsheet, what surprised you most about the culture at Smartsheet? Not just the tech that you were diving into, but the culture at the company.
I think what's really interesting here at Smartsheet is there's a lot of culture of ownership and an idea of sort of the customer and innovation, but it had definitely felt that we needed to get going with our own AI work and efforts and those things. They were happening in many teams, and
Yeah.
my role was to just bring that all together into sort of collective efforts. Right.
Yeah, my sense is that it's really an exciting time at Smartsheet. You've got some new leadership and just so much energy and talent and deep expertise that, it's just kind of like my feeling has just been get out of the way and watch us go because it's really, I think, an exciting time for your company.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I can really feel the flywheel start to spin here, and
Yeah.
folks really get excited about, and everything layers with momentum here. So you launch one AI tool and another one, and everything is sort of interconnecting to everything else. So it's been
Yeah.
really fun to just. I was a Smartsheet customer also for 9 years before I came
Oh,
to work here.
so
So
you brought your own experiences to the table, which I think is really cool.
yeah, and I knew sort of what I liked about the product and what I would like to change, right? And
Yeah,
some of that is with AI and automation and those things.
right.
So I have some feedback, but definitely it's been really fun to get into underneath the covers a little bit and see how the architecture runs and
Yeah.
see the great teams here that are really focused on delivering it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I've been focused a lot lately on the shift from AI features to AI ecosystems. And, this idea that the value doesn't come, it's not just in any one model or any one tool, it's in really the connectivity and how they connect. And from where you sit, what do you see? Are you seeing enterprises actually moving past this proof of concept stage that it feels like we've been in for a really long time and doing things with AI functionality that are actually delivering value? Or are we still, in some instances, stuck in first gear?
I believe both things are still happening. I think you're seeing
Yeah,
some top companies get past that and start to really interconnect all this value. But I would say there's still a trust gap, so to speak, and a
yeah,
governance gap. But
yeah,
but part of this is just all the independent silos that are all being powered by separate AI is, I think, very confusing for
yeah,
companies. So a lot of what you said, the ecosystem, is what I'm really excited here at Smartsheet, because we really believe in horizontal AI, that everything should plug and play well with each other, talk to each other, that it's just the beginning of that moving together, that it's really a collective surge, so to speak. But it
yeah.
has to be powered by the right things.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So do you feel like you're at a point with your customers that you're beyond the, okay, show me a demo, to how do we deploy this at scale? I am like super excited about this. Are you, where are you on that
Yeah,
yardstick?
what's really great about my job is I get to work with the customers that are the most excited about AI and their own
Okay.
strategies, and some of them are big and small, but they have vision, and they want to be early adopters of what we're providing and get in
Right.
and run with the technologies that we've built, but also give us a lot of feedback on how we can interconnect those, how we could get them running faster, how we can start to really personalize and customize these things, right?
Right.
um, and that's been some of the both biggest companies in the world, but also some really boutique firms that are really doing it well within their own space on both sides of that. But it's been really exciting to see those aha moments.
Yeah, I agree. That's kind of what makes what we get up every day to do exciting, right?
Yeah.
And I think that what I see is that enterprises need AI to work inside of their existing workflows, not replace those workflows. And that doesn't mean we don't have to fine tune our workflows. I think that's part of the early part of the work on the AI front, looking at those workflows, evaluating them, and that sort of thing. But I think the reality of it is, and when AI really delivers the biggest value, is when it can work inside of those
Mhm.
existing workflows. What do you see? What do you see, Drew? You're out there among them. In the weeds all day, every day. What do you see that's holding proof of concepts back?
Yeah, I really do think it's that trust and governance gap that we talked about, but it's
Okay.
also I think there's some of this vertical lock-in too from a lot of different vendors that are using some different terminology. What one calls an agent, one calls an agentic loop in a workflow. So it's just what are those common terms, and how can we all start using the same terminology, but also the same protocols, the same plugins, the same interfaces, to let it all speak to each other, right?
Right.
It feels sort of like early days of SaaS and web services that I was in, where everyone was still just trying to find common ground, if
Yeah.
that makes sense, so we
Yeah,
can
that
make
makes sense.
interoperability happen.
Yeah, and I think that integration complexity is such a huge factor for a lot of organizations, and data, getting arms around data, access to data, permissioning, all of that sort of thing. All of that in a big bucket can present challenges for organizations to navigate through.
Yeah, it's sort of like who made the change? When was it made? Was it made on my behalf? Was it made on its own profile? How can it be reversed? How can it be or rolled
Yeah,
forward or made into a template? So all these, it gets really to the speed of change, and this thing, like, if one person on a team adopts these tools and moves 7x faster, that doesn't necessarily make the team better. Like, they all have to have team level adoption is what we found, which is where our platform really comes in, because a lot of these individual tools, even tools that I use like Claude Code, it can be great for me to use, but the whole team needs to adopt it together for you to
sure.
see really agentic transformation, right? If
Yeah,
that
yeah,
makes
well, that
sense.
makes perfect sense. So let's talk, Drew, about MCP, Model
Sure.
Context Protocol.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening who isn't either an engineer or an AI geek, let's make this real, okay? Is MCP just another tech spec that'll be forgotten in a couple of years, or is there something more fundamental happening here?
Yeah, I really think it's here to stay. For me, sort of common language, just like when APIs first rolled out and really got a lot of domain and a lot of traction associated with them. I think this is just it's the sort of the universal adapter for AIs to know context, what tools they have available to them, how can they be used in the right amount and in the right situations, with the right amount of tokens, right? Because a lot of this is doing great work at scale, but with the right cost. Because the problem tends when you hook AI into API is you can just burn a lot of tokens if you don't know what you're doing, or if the
Right.
API itself isn't made for it.
Right. Well, that makes sense. So basically, you build once and it works with any compatible AI client, whether it's Claude or anything else. And so, really, that addresses that complexity issue.
Exactly. Well,
Yeah.
because LLMs also have limited resources available to them, right? In terms of
Right.
context windows and these things. So you really have to keep that stuff sacred as you work with an end user, because they just want the best results, right? And I think sometimes when you fill that with a lot of noise that's not needed, you really want to be precise and surgical with the data, which is what MCP allows you to do, right? Those
Right.
calls, those operations, and that's what we've been really excited about with our customers, is just finding those real aha moments, that are powered by MCP, but also to keep making the tools better
Yeah.
underneath them as well.
In my experience, this matters a lot to the CIOs out there
Yeah.
on a number of fronts, right? One is reducing that integration sprawl, cutting technical debt, removing walled garden fears, a variety of things like that. So all of these things are good, but talk with me about Smartsheet's decision path here. Why'd you build an MCP rather than a proprietary API path?
Yeah, I think for us it was really about bringing the knowledge to what natively the AIs wanted to work with, and then making them really token efficient and surgical with how they use data. So for us, we really wanted to use different uh, technology advancements and improvements in our MCP to be able to look across the wide data that Smartsheet has, and use them to make things happen at scale,
Okay.
but not with errors. I think what we found, a lot of these MCPs, a lot of folks do sort of, I would call them lazy MCPs, where they're just launching them with base level tools. They don't necessarily care what's sent back. They just want one to have one, to check it off. And we want ours to really be incredibly efficient and to be at parity with our internal AI tools as well, in terms of feature and functionality.
Well, that makes sense. So, talk with me a little bit about the discoverability angle here. I think that's a
Sure.
big part of what I understand that you and the Smartsheet team have really focused on.
Yeah, so we launched with 36 tools. A lot of those tools we believe will start to have differentiation with our clients, so that we'll have them with different views for each client or industry, so to speak, over time. And then what we've really experimented with lately that we're really excited about is shipping customer knowledge over those tool sets. So custom UI, prompt cookbooks, these things that are industry or client specific, that actually comes across with the tool and protocol. So you could think about folks are getting their ability to work with us in quick iteration cycles, give us requirements that we can deliver very quickly, to
Mhm.
have very unique experiences tailor fit for their businesses.
Well, that makes sense. So, also on this discovery front, do I understand correctly that AI agents can find and use Smartsheet capabilities without being pre programmed to do that?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's definitely so. These tools, when they come live in the MCP, the first thing that we sort of deliver prompt cookbooks for folks to start training on these and
Right.
understand what they can use. And the first one is for it to really understand that it's a Smartsheet expert, and here's the various of the tools that it can start to walk through. But for us, there's read tools, which is just starting to get to know our artifacts, our portfolios, sheets, and workflows, right? And then it tends to get to create after that. So people start to, they first want to sort of sniff around and understand what can happen within there. You know, summarize, build me a dashboard or a visual, those things, but then they want to start making changes, but then they start taking data and making wholesale new data, right? Which is a
Hmm.
real interesting sort of creator flywheel in itself, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Interesting for sure. So, agentic.
Yeah.
Agentic is the word of the year.
Yeah.
Everyone's using it, every conversation, and I always push back on that a little bit, largely because, an agent is only as effective as the context from which it's working.
Yes.
Talk with us a little bit about the role that MCP plays here. What does it unlock that a well-prompted chatbot couldn't do just as well?
Yeah, for me, the difference between chatbot and MCP delivered tools is really about taking action. So and learning over time. So folks can have their project memory. They can be in Claude working with various tools and give it examples of what they like, but also they can really start to take action and even scheduled action. I need these updates happening every Friday. I need a status report that looks like this on this date, so it can really start taking work from people's clicks and into delivered prompts that then go to scheduled work for them, right?
Yeah.
Which used to be something that they would have to put on a calendar and do, or a checklist, right? The agent can start learning to do and get its legs and take action, especially when the person is away. Is it just needs to get done, and that's where it really starts to open up, I think, and people start to trust it more,
So that trust is such an important part of the equation. I mean, which is the understatement of the year. But
right?
basically, what from a context standpoint, this is business process understanding. Am I right? Like the agent
Yeah,
actually knows what the sheet means, not just what it says.
yeah. Yeah, I think what's really interesting is to understand that the artifacts need human understanding, which means that they all need to get better over time. And then we have things like context graphs that can understand the relationship between those sheets in an agent-ready format that the MCP can talk to. So sometimes MCP goes agent to agent, sometimes it's a tool call, a wrap tool call itself. And all of those things can get better over time. So the next time you come back to it, it remembers either in the project memory or in those relationships.
Yeah.
So it's the fact that you just keep turning that sort of ability for it to get smarter, and not just smarter but more efficient, um,
Mhm.
to know what you're looking for, because that's the big
Right.
thing. What's in a lot of people's heads and even what's in our work systems, just needs to move quicker into tasks and workflows and work getting done properly.
Right. Right. I was reading something about an example on this front. For instance, like an agent can read a Smartsheet project plan
Mhm.
and identify a deadline that you missed,
Yes.
and then cross reference the team's capacity across the
Mhm.
board, and then reassign that task to Shelly because she's on vacation, to Drew, who's not. And it's not just, it's actually about moving that work forward. It's not just, oh, here's what the problem was.
Yes. Yeah,
Mm.
we call those sort of chained tool calls together. So if people
Yeah.
first start out with that simple, like we talked about, just tell me what's there, but
Right.
then they start with writing, but then they start sort of chaining that stuff together. And then where agentic comes in is where that happens when you're sort of not around. Now I understand this action needs to happen. It needs to happen a couple times a week. I can
Right.
put that on schedule, and when I come back to my laptop, I'm pleasantly surprised that work was done while I was away, you know,
We all need
all
that.
through the same connection.
We all need that, Drew. So
Right.
really, MCP is the bridge here, right?
Yeah, and I
It's
think it's the connecting layer for everything if you think about it, because
yeah,
we also use MCP with our own internal AI that's within Smartsheet called Smart Assist. We use it within this external AI.
yeah,
It's the way that agents want to access tools, in the agentic loop.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Makes sense. So here's where it gets philosophically interesting for me, Drew. For a decade, the SaaS playbook was all about lock-in.
mhm.
Keep the data in your garden, or should I say the vendor's walled garden, which made the
Sure.
decision to buy, kind of wrought with stress, because if I'm making that purchasing decision, I'm kind of putting my neck on the line and we're kind of stuck. And it made switching painful by design. I mean, that was the tool, that was the playbook,
Yep.
right? And so, what it is that you're sharing is that the goal here is to make Smartsheet more accessible to outside AI models, which I see as really kind of a really big deal. I mean, why is that? Why is that a smart bet for the business?
Yeah, I think for us, it's we at Smartsheet, we're never going to train frontier models. We're not going to spend billions on inference and become the
Yeah,
next Anthropic or OpenAI. We want to be a bridge where teams can use AI together, but in a trusted system that they understand that the work product is what they're looking for, and that they can all sort of work in it together to exchange work. Because great work is all done in teams, right?
right.
Individually, we can do amazing things, but at some point, and Smartsheet's used for to run huge events, to pull off major accomplishments, building skyscrapers, rockets, all these things, and that takes people and experts and minds working together. So we really just want for folks to be able to horizontally plug into us and use us wherever they need to make
Hmm.
work easier.
Hmm. Well,
And
I
I think
think that's,
MCP is the bridge, right? Like we
yeah.
talked
I mean,
about.
it certainly makes it truly, as someone who has made buying decisions for the bulk of my career. I mean, that makes a buying decision um, easier, I think,
Yeah.
and so really the bet here is a pretty simple one on Smartsheet's part. The best connected work management platform is more durable than being a closed ecosystem.
Yes, and it's going to have to be well connected, and it's not going to be. We are not saying that we're the only place that work's going to happen, but we are
Right.
saying that we can be the register that moves it forward for everyone.
Got it. That makes
Um,
yeah,
and I
makes
think
perfect
everyone's
sense.
going to have an AI system of choice here moving forward, right? It's going to just become like email, or who do you use for video conferencing, or whatever. Everyone's going to have one, right? So to
Absolutely.
think that people want 17 different systems with all different rules and different declinations and different things to learn is I think we're all dealing with data overload, generally
Yes.
speaking, right? At work today. And I want less context
Yeah.
switching and more real valued work done with the
Yeah.
people that I love to work with, in my
Yeah.
teams.
Fewer browser tabs open, fewer hopping from application
Oh
to
my God,
application to,
please.
where was I? What was I doing? Where was that? It was in Teams. No, wait a minute. It was in WebEx. No, wait a minute, or
Right?
whatever. I mean, it's like it makes you feel like you have ADD when you don't.
Yeah. And then, did you ever get anything done today? Right? Because jumping
Yeah.
between all these tools, sometimes I feel like it can take so long just to get something simple done. And they all have an agent for me now. Every single one of
Yeah.
them has a different. But
Yeah.
when I look at it, I'm like, what I think an agent is not necessarily clarified in each one of those, because we're still early days.
Yeah, yeah,
You know.
no argument from me there.
Yeah.
So let me get a little technical here for a moment. And I think that because I think the how matters here as much as the what. So I think it's important to start with the reality that not all MCP implementations are created equal. You addressed that just a few moments
Yep.
ago. So with that in mind, walk me through what Smartsheet actually built and how you view the engineering decisions made here as a differentiator, as setting Smartsheet apart from a company that just ships a basic MCP wrapper and calls it a day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. Great question. I think for us, it was a bunch of different levels. But first of all, we really wanted to be precise with the token utilization we have. We wanted to compress those responses. We wanted the errors that were returned to be learnable by the AI, so it understands that it gets errors in the type and format that it's looking for. All of that just equates to the fact that we believe that we use, significantly less tokens than any
Right.
other platform out there, but also because we use less tokens, we can then do much more complex work across a lot more artifacts, right? In a
Right.
single context window. So, what was really fun is to figure out all that with the team for launch, and then really pick our spots, because we're working with some of the biggest customers and companies in the world, and a lot of them have a lot of big data, right, and a lot of needs from us. So
Right.
we really wanted to build the most token efficient and the most ability to do the tool chaining, like we talked about. Because of it, one sort of fed the other. You be super efficient and precise, then all of a sudden you can open up to do a lot more complex impacting work for our customers.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but fewer tokens means greater affordability.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and and I think we're in the early days of this, Drew, but the same lessons that people have been learning on their cloud journeys is that, at one point in time, the mantra was everything has to move to the cloud, everything, hurry up,
Yeah.
everything has to move to the cloud. And then people started saying, holy crap, like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
spending so much money. I had no idea we got to move some of this back on prem. We've got to do a hybrid model, which of course makes perfect sense. So I feel like that's really an important part of the conversation here is how to do this in a way that doesn't break the bank.
Yeah, I think token cost is the new public cloud, to your point.
Yeah.
Like everybody had the intern story where you hired an intern and they all of a sudden, by mistake, used $100,000 of cloud costs because they were trying to, get something done. And I just think we're in that whole world
Yeah.
where token maxing is again what people talk about it now, like they're almost proud of it, that instead of actually like what you did with those tokens and the code you shipped or the projects you got done, just use the maximum amount possible whenever you can as a badge of honor, which to me is very interesting because that all has a cost to it, to your point. And depending on the model, it can have a very heavy cost to it.
Right.
And I just think companies should be really mindful to use really token efficient tools, but also tools that really think about being surgical with the usage of that tokens to give you the output you're looking for. And
Right.
if folks can't prove that with the data they're sharing, then they're probably going for vertical lock-in like we talked about and not
Yeah.
horizontal support of
Yeah.
AI anyway.
What I'm thinking about when I look at this is I'm thinking about parity, and I'm thinking about what you've described to me that you're doing, that you've created, that you're going to continue to forge ahead with is basically MCP parity as a strategic commitment. It's not your vision here, and stop me anytime I'm screwing up. But the vision here isn't partial integration, it's full parity. And
Yep.
every action that's available in Smartsheet's UI will be accessible via MCP, all
Yes.
connected to the same foundation models, agents, tools. But the other part of this that I see is a huge deal in terms of why this matters to customers is that it really kind of future proofs their investment. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and their data is theirs, right? It's
Right?
generally interconnected, and we want to
Okay.
be the workflow agent that where people get work done. But instead of navigate to the tool being the end answer, if that's where all complex work gets done, and you have 12, 15, 20 tools, right? It's the AI comes to you, right? And you can
Okay.
do everything that you're capable of. And I think MCP apps and UI are another real fascinating thing that we will be shipping very soon, where it's not just, walls of text, it's also beautiful visuals, it's clickable links, it's deep links into things. You ask us to create a dashboard or visual for you. Those things can all be intermixed, right? And it's not just I think that's the other thing is people think like it's just some stuff can't be necessarily done over text. Well, we think it's going to go multimodal here very soon. And your
Okay.
people will have what they want, where they want it, and they won't want a context switch, is I think the big thing that we're really betting on.
So, as I understand it, as new AI capabilities are added to the Smartsheet platform, they just become automatically available to any connected agent. And what that means for customers is, oh my gosh, no need to reintegrate. And the days of having to wait for a separate API release are behind us.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think customers want their connected experience to be at the edge with their in-app experience, and they don't want any drift. And in fact, I
Yeah.
want to launch not just both together. I even think our connected experience will be slightly ahead. That you'll have people prototyping and beta testing things in the connected experience that then come live in the app a few days or weeks later. Right? I think
Yeah.
it'll be they're both be, as we like to call them, golden experiences. It's not just done as an afterthought. It's not just checked off,
Yeah.
and it's a real innovation cycle for us.
And time to value is much
Uh,
shorter.
exactly.
I like it. All right, let's get into the nitty gritty, Drew, the part that makes CIOs nervous. So, when you make it this easy for AI to plug into enterprise systems, the immediate question that comes to mind for me are things like, what does this have access to? Who authorized it? How do I know it won't take an action somewhere down the line that somebody didn't approve? Of course, going back to the trust issues that we've talked about throughout this conversation. How are you thinking about and solving for that and relieving that anxiety factor for CIOs?
Sure. Yeah, I don't think you can just bolt governance on after the fact. I think you
Yeah.
have to bake it live into the infrastructure that every agent, every query, every actual action, it all passes through a policy layer. It's in the plumbing itself, and therefore everything's monitored, everything's declinated, everything's understood. And we really built our data platform with a governed data lakehouse architecture, with these tiered quality gates, right? So the raw data comes in, it's validated, it's cleaned, it's promoted, before any agent touches it. And then as the agents touch it, they're all passing through governance tiers that are tracking and monitoring everything with things like data time travel to do reversals of those changes. So if somebody makes a mess of something because they wrote a poor prompt, you should be able to roll those things back. You should be able
Okay.
to understand who made those things, because like we talked about, one of the things in teams help everything move faster, but they can also, cause issues where folks need to clean up other people's mistakes, right? And we really don't want our AI workers to cause problems for people that can't be deeply understood, learned from, but also rolled back, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So how does MCP improve governance for the CIO ease of mind? Today, I think a lot of times employees are copying and pasting data into consumer AI tools and doing things that most of us would rather not think about. But how does MCP improve that governance? Is it just the fact that it's this built into everything from a foundational level?
Yeah, I think it's a permission data pipe. If you think about it, it's not an open one. So it's either acting as on behalf of a user on or as an or in agent permissions that user grants it. So everything is sort of in a monitored mode and is understood. It's not out there just making changes that you haven't asked for, right? And it's
Hmm.
all done with an output in mind. So what we really love about MCP is that there's a lot of security and enablement and these things that are built into the protocol. And one of those things that we'll be able to do, for instance, and do today for people is enable new tools on a per customer basis, right? And I mean per user ID or per group ID, and then the whole company. So if folks want to try out new things, but maybe you don't want to give that to the whole population until you understand how it's going to be used in your company. Um, so it's really about personalization at the end and getting to something that really feels like it's been made specifically for every company's workflows.
Okay. All right, well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I was reading earlier, actually, it's probably sometime last week. I know that you all published a piece on responsible AI design at Smartsheet.
Uh-huh.
And I want to pull on that thread a little bit. And I think there's a version of this conversation where, the term responsible AI can be viewed as fluff or marketing language. And let me tell you, before I spent the last decade as an analyst, I also spent 20 years as a marketing brand strategist. So, no diss on marketing, but the reality of it is, in far too many instances, we've got marketing language that is full of fluff that, once you dig in, there's not a lot there. So the reality is there a version of is the version that you're talking about of responsible AI design, is that actually load bearing?
Sure. Yeah, I think it is load bearing. The four principles that you talked about, I think that was in a blog that I helped to write.
Yeah.
Data privacy and security, accountability,
Accountability.
accountability and control,
Yeah.
reliability and fairness, and transparency and explainability. Um, each one of those leads to tech specs and is something that's actually implemented in the platform. It's not just a paper policy like we talked about, where
Right.
so every AI generated action in the Smartsheet, it surfaces this sort of explicit confirmation before it modifies your data.
Okay.
When it generates that consent, um, and that content, it knows what it gets to act on: a summary, a risk assessment, a suggested status change. So the platform makes it really clear that what came from an AI and what came from a human, and there's no middle ground there, right?
Right.
Um, and then we really said, like, our sort of commitment on what we do with your data and how we separate it and how we secure it and how we encrypt it is part of that promise as well. So and all of that can be explained, shown to customers. We can provide them the logs, we can provide them the interfaces, and you do that in an open way to say, look, it's part of the infrastructure itself. It's not
Right.
just something we wrote down on paper.
Yeah. Well, and again, it all goes back to just one thing, and it's trust.
Right.
And the only way to move this forward is to have something that customers can trust. And I think that, that load bearing functionality that you talked about, to me, what's so significant is that every single AI action in Smartsheet is auditable, and
Yes.
users can review and evaluate and improve any AI generated change before they apply it. And all of this, what makes all of this so attractive fundamentally is that it's the architecture. It's not an add-on. It's not anything
Yeah.
else. It's how it's built. And I think that to me is what is impressive about what Smartsheet is doing here.
Yeah, and we really believe in open telemetry here, and then common frameworks that are used broadly. Like we have deployed tools that are very that are heavy on the market adoption, but we understand that we're going to use them specifically here for our customers within our architecture. So it's not like we believe that we needed to create something. We needed to use market leading technologies, but really use them on behalf of our customers in a way that we could really share with them in that open telemetry type world. So it's not just like a proprietary log or a tool that we say we do it behind the scenes that can't be shared. It's all done in a way that eventually will be shareable transparently with them.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. It makes a lot
Yeah,
of sense. I want to touch on this just for another second, because this is
sure.
really, in my experience, where we see a lot of enterprise AI deployments kind of quietly break down. And some of the policies that we talk about that are so important, sometimes they look great on paper, but then reality intervenes and something slips. And what does Smartsheet's actual governance infrastructure look like in practice? How do you catch the thing that was supposed to be caught?
Yeah, it's really around these live governance layers. We use layers and tools from market leading providers like AWS and Databricks and then we complement them with how we build them out in our architecture. So
Okay.
we're using tools like Unity Catalog, we're using tools like MLflow, where all these are sort of market standards that are used at thousands, tens of thousands of companies, but we're adopting them for our customers here in that open telemetry framework. And then when you can use things like, data clean rooms and these things to bring folks in and show them their data and do it within an open way that you can plug into their own observability. What log
Yeah.
system do you have? How would you like me to send you this data? You do that in a way that's very sort of, again, with the spirit of openness, like we said. But
Right.
I think for me, it's also around people understanding what AI can do and where it can be limited and what you want it to do and on what data and what data it shouldn't touch.
Right.
Um, so I think there still should be some stuff that should be human only, um, modifiable, but a lot of that could be maybe it's you and a prompt when you get to work with that data versus you wouldn't want agents while you are away from your desk doing certain things that
Sure.
could really hurt your company. Um, so all of that is part of the system, sort of what and where do you want this to work for you, and on what. um
So the practice here is meeting me where I am as a customer, not saying this is how it works. You have to fit in, you have to fit your square peg
right,
into this round hole.
right, and with a
Yeah.
chosen system that you've already bought and you're trying to roll out, and with a lot of vendors saying
Yeah.
that they don't want to give you that sort of open playbook like we talked about.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because I do think with MCP comes a promise of you're going to share me my logs, right? You're going to let me understand what my people did or the
Right.
AI did on my behalf, right? Because some of that comes back to the token usage, but some of that just comes back to just clean governance
Right.
in the end. Because in the end, it's their data. Like I think a
Sure.
lot of this will come back to it's my business, it's my data, it's my workflows. I want to understand them deeply and own them, regardless of where they're being run.
And that's as it should be. right?
Yeah,
I
right.
mean, absolutely. All right, Drew, as we wrap this episode, I am going to ask you to look into your crystal ball. If
Yeah,
MCP or something like it becomes the norm, if every major enterprise platform builds to this standard, what does the actual day-to-day of an enterprise worker look like in the next 18 months, which frankly feels like a lifetime?
right.
In the next 18 months, are we still all living in those 15 different browser tabs and jumping from application to application throughout our workday, or what does it look like?
Yeah, I really think in 18 months, a lot of folks will move to having their personal group of agents that they depend on, that they will all be working in prompts, let's say 80 to 90% of the time, but a lot of that will just be the agents working on their behalf. A lot of that manual toil, which we all have in our jobs, and that context switching will go away, and we will consolidate into sort of expert interfaces where I could verify the work's being done, and I could be brought into focus when something needs human judgment, or the agent workers that are out taking action on your behalf that have been highly customized, personalized, and therefore have earned your trust and the company's trust as well.
Right, right. I think my crystal ball says the teams that figure out agentic workflows in that next 12 to 18 months will, without question, have a structural productivity advantage. And I think that's what it's all about. That's what we're all looking for.
Yep, I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, and I think we'll see it like with my engineers, the folks that have really adopted this, they move 5 to 7x faster than they were before adopting these tools. And I just think obviously, I think these tools have really focused on engineering and coding in this
Yeah.
first wave. But I think once we all get this, think about doing 5 to 7x times the work
Yeah.
um, that you could do, and also being somewhat delighted doing that work, like that you're making your own virtual workers better on an ongoing basis.
Right. Yeah.
And that's I think the dream, right? Is that we can all, move faster, but also not be worried about what the outputs are going to be.
Move faster, love what we're doing, maybe love what we're doing more,
Yeah.
and get more accomplished, feel more confident in what we're able to deliver on behalf of our company, on behalf of our customers, whatever it is we're
Yes.
doing. But I think that structural productivity advantage that is possible with AI coming from a single AI workspace with the platform quietly and intuitively coming to me, that's the holy grail, right? And I think
Totally.
that, yeah, it is. And I think that, when we hear about, I have this conversation all the time. We've got this fear of AI, this very understandable fear in the
Mhm.
workplace of AI replacing humans and what's this going to do to my job. And I think that it's so important to underscore the role that humans can and should play here. And you've spoken to this a couple of times here.
Yeah.
But AI is an assist, not as a replacement, with humans very involved every step of the way. And I think to me that's what we'll see more of in the months ahead, and that's an exciting thing.
Yeah, how do we help it unleash people's creativity to make new
Yeah,
things happen, to get rid of the manual toil that we were all wasting time in, and to have
yeah,
more time for each other as coworkers too? Those brainstorming
yeah,
sessions, the ability to sort of pair program, pair project work together on the harder issues,
yeah,
because that's where I get the most excitement from work, right? Is when you're not just in a meeting informing each other, you're making decisions rapidly and you're getting stuff done and you're prototyping new
yeah,
ideas. That's what I think people always want more time to do. They shouldn't necessarily be filling out workflows or doing stuff that they know could be done in an automated fashion if they just had a
yeah,
system that could learn how to do it. And
yeah.
that system's coming, right?
I love
It's
it.
very close. Yeah.
I love it. Well, this is exciting, and I'm really thrilled to see Smartsheet's focus here. Drew Garner, SVP of Engineering at Smartsheet, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing your insights, and for the great conversation. It might be your first time on the show, but I'm confident it won't be the last.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed the
All right.
conversation and the vision and everything else. So appreciate
Yeah,
you
it's
as
been
well.
wonderful. Well, this is Shelly Kramer. I'm your host here at Kramer Co. Thanks so much for joining us today for this episode of the Age of AI series, and we'll see you all here again next time. Drew, thanks again.